Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to get started. Just taking a minute to appreciate this moment. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. I know that many of our meetings of recent have been on Zoom, and it's really nice to be in person, so thank you. And I'm going to officially call this meeting to order at 6:48 p.m. This is a meeting of the African Heritage Reparations Assembly. It's a historic first in-person public hearing listening session. And so we're going to just go over some housekeeping things to get us started, and then we'll do some introductions, and our agenda is up here, which may go out of order at some point, but we'll see. So some housekeeping. Hopefully you've found where the bathrooms are, just around the corner where Kim is sitting over there. Please feel free to get up if you have to go to the bathroom at any time. And there are some refreshments. Hopefully you found refreshments and cookies. And I am Michelle Miller. I'm the chair of the African Heritage Reparations Assembly. I am also a town councilor representing District 1. And I am very, very grateful to be in this position and doing this work with this incredible group of individuals who are going to now introduce themselves.
Milka Shabazz, Herb Rhodes,
Paula Lord, Alexis Reed, Deborah Bridges.
So you can actually pass it to Hala. Hala's going to start us. You each received on your chair 2 papers. One is an invitation to brave space, and the other is ropes. Ropes is our community guidelines that the AHRA uses. So we won't go over them in any detail, but just so that you have them to give you a sense of the guidelines that we use in our meeting space.
Okay, thank you everyone. I now welcome us to receive this invitation to Brave Space. And it is by Nikki Scott Betty Jones. Together, we will create Brave Space. Because there is no such thing as safe space. We exist in the real world, we all carry scars, and we all have cause for them. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We will call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together. And we will work on it side by side. Thank you all. Now we'll pass to Ms. Bridges.
Ms. Bridges is going to make a statement that is coming to us from Councilor Lopes, and Ms. Bridges.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. This statement is from Nika Lopes. We know that we are standing on native land, and hopefully we are all best built on native land. Again, I will not offer a north, east, west, south nod or explanation, but invite you all to research the indigenous of the Connecticut River Valley and beyond for yourselves, or uplift what you already know. Learn to pronounce names correctly, like we correct those who pronounce the H in Amherst. This land, named after one of the first to participate in biological warfare. As a descendant of the first Black and Indigenous families of Amherst, I would like to thank the AHRA for holding this space and recognizing my mother, Deborah Bridges, for her role in uplifting our lesser-known history, including curating the first town exhibit and push to tell the history of Amherst like it was and like it is, inclusive of the indigenous and African Americans who were integral to the fabric and character of Amherst and surrounding towns. Rejecting that day, that a day or month reserved for us will do. Thank you, Anika. Council President, I would like to acknowledge some other councilors that are here tonight. Dorothy Pam in the back, if you could just wave. Thank you, Dorothy.
That was my son that just dialed.
I believe that Jennifer Paul will be coming, but is not here yet. Shalini Ball-Milne. Thank you, Shalini. And Alicia Walker. And of course, Anika was in spirit. And we also have our Amherst College student senators that I want to thank for being here. In a way that is so meaningful for our community, and to be partnering with the Amherst College as an institution and doing this really important work. We appreciate the partnerships. Thank you. All right, so you could bring us Lynn, our president of our town council, Lynn Geismar, is not able to be here immediately. I think she'll be joining us a little bit later, but she did want to leave a video message. So just one more. Oh, we put it in this order actually. So we also have a welcome from Representative Mindy Dom, who was really wanted to be here, but was unable to be here tonight. So we'll go ahead and start with that.
Louder. One year in the first precinct program in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. Thank you for being here tonight. This historic first in-person opportunity to shape Amherst comparative justice program. I'm proud to serve and live in a community that's committed to social innovation and climate justice. And I especially appreciate the members of the African Heritage Reparation Assembly, other civic volunteers, committees, and our town council who are working so
I'll just arrive. So Jennifer, we've already recognized both opponents are recommending this organization.
All right, so we're gonna try this, since the speakers aren't working, and this is a message from our council president, Linda.
You guys might want to try putting on closed captions. It might not be super accurate, but it might be accurate.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're excited to be here, yeah.
In December 2020, Amherst County unanimously voted to adopt a resolution affirming the town's commitment to end structural racism and achieve racial equity for Black residents. The guiding principles of that resolution was the town's commitment to engage in the path of Black residents who have been harmed by discrimination and racial injustice in Amherst. Since that time, we established the African Heritage Reparations Assembly and committed to annual contributions to the reparations fund that when fully realized the donation to the dollars, should always swing help shape the reproductive justice movement for Amherst and will further inform our work becoming an anti-racist community. Thank you for your valuable time, and I hope to see you later.
You, Dr. Chavez, and you can skip to the next slide, please.
Tonight we want to stress and affirm the position that our town has taken that forms, that undergirds all our work and out of which we stem. You see on the screen the town resolution that was taken, and if I just read the first line, say, be it further resolved that the Amherst town will engage in individual and collective work to understand bias and the historical role racism has played in Amherst and the community at large in order to better lead to a town which is safe, welcoming, and equitable for all people. And so the full statement is on our website. I encourage you to be familiar with it, but it is this resolution out of which our work for reparative justice emerges.
Talk a little bit about the next slide. So the African Heritage Reparations Assembly was formed by the town council to study and develop reparation proposals for residents of African heritage. And the beginning part of our work together was really laying the foundation in a lot of ways. So we were working very hard in the beginning of our time together, one, to build trust as an assembly within the body, and also to work with our town council to secure a funding stream or secure some funding so that when we started the work of going out and consulting with the Black community, we would know what sort of budget we had to work with. So we did work with the council, and as Lynn said, the council has committed to $2 million to the dedicated reparation fund over a 10-year period. And so at this point, and this is sort of the kickoff of our community engagement work, being here tonight, and we really do feel that this is a historic moment for the community. And so each of you that are here tonight are part of that moment in the town's history. So thank you again. And so our work now is to get out into the community to begin to consult with residents of African heritage and to begin to develop the plan that will ultimately be recommended to the town council in June of 2023. So everybody's voice matters in this process. And of course, the plan itself will be very much centered on residents of African heritage, the voices of our residents of African heritage. And we'll be beginning this process now as a committee of developing criteria, including use of funds, eligibility criteria, all of these questions that still need to be answered. So we are here tonight to listen to you all, and we are very open. We want to give each person here who would like to speak an opportunity to do so for 2 to 3 minutes at least for the first time. If we could allow that to happen in sort of round one, and then if there's somebody that would like to speak a second time, we can certainly do that as well. And before we do that, Dr. Shabazz is going to say a few words on what reparative justice is. Part of our mission is to educate the community as well as to be in this consultative process, to be educating the community about reparations and about what's possible when we're talking about local reparations. And maybe Dr. Shabazz or somebody will say a word about federal reparations, but what we're doing here tonight is really focusing on our local reparations initiative.
Thank you. And I will be brief, because again, this is a listening session, so we're really here to listen to you all. We refer you to our website and the town of Amherst and our Engage Amherst page for, more expansive discussion. When we talk about reparative justice, it's simply the act of warmly holding space and centering and prioritizing the needs, the concerns, and the interests of people of African heritage who are resident here in Amherst. That's our charge, that's our work, and what it requires us to hear from the community. And this space is open for all voices of the community that are tied in with that purpose of centering, prioritizing, and holding space for people of African descent here in Amherst.
All right. Okay, so we're going to open it up now for listening, and we want you to feel comfortable with either coming up here and speaking, or Alexis has offered to take the mic out into the audience so she can take it right to you.
Hopefully.
We all be cars.
You are, yes. That's the end surprise. So please feel free to just go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to speak, and Alexis will.
It's a brave space now.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jocelyn Faison. How are you?
Good.
Excellent. Thanks for coming out. I grew up in Amherst, all right? Long time townie. I'm not quite a townie because I wasn't born here. So they don't consider me a townie. But going through the Amherst school system was a challenge. I was always the only African American student in the class. My mother was a kindergarten teacher. She also taught the student teachers in early education at UMass. My father was a lieutenant colonel in the Army, and he was also, after that, after he retired, he became a magistrate in Northampton Courts. Okay. Amherst was very lonely place for me as a student. Being the only one in the class is hard. Even in Europe, in Germany, I was not the only one in the class, okay? In England, when I was an exchange student in England in high school, I was not the only one in the class. But in Amherst, countries that I belong to, I was the only child. Now, my parents were very careful about how they raised us. They wanted us to have good feelings, to have pride in our family, in our country, everything. But you have to have teachers that look like you. My mother, Mr. Wallace, who else? There were only a couple other people of color in the Amherst school system when I went through in the 70s. And I really think Amherst needs to invest in having more diversity in the school system. People need to learn history. I didn't have to take American history until I was a junior in college. I am learning African American history now at 59, and it makes me furious, okay? I get so angry as I'm reading all this horrific stuff that happened to my relatives over the course of the history of this country. Now, in terms of reparations, as far as I'm concerned, there's not enough money in the world to make up for what happened, okay? There's not enough money. $2 million, I'm sorry, that's nothing, okay? So I think this town really needs to work on diversity in the school system, in the town. Everybody, we all have to learn to get along. Everybody's valuable. Everybody's opinion matters. I grew up that if you are of a different culture, different race, get to know that person. I speak fluent German and Spanish. I'm learning Hebrew and Arabic. And because I come from a family of teachers, that is why I know how to reach out across the aisle and talk to someone, just like we're supposed to be doing in Congress. But we really have to get along. We have to find a way to talk to each other and go beyond our differences and have that diversity and have that coming together that we don't have in Amherst right now. Thank you.
What your experience has been living in Amherst as a Black resident. This is an opportunity to share ideas, to share hopes, fears. If you do not identify as a person of African heritage, this is an opportunity to share how you would like to support this initiative. So anything is possible in this discussion tonight. So thank you for starting us. You're welcome. Pass that to Alexis for whoever else would like to speak.
What are your thoughts about what reparations would look like? From the baby's already.
Yeah, and I just wanted to recognize that we have Pamela Young here, who is our newly hired Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, and I'm so thrilled that she is here, and our Assistant Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, Jennifer Moyston, who has just been an incredible pillar of support for our community. So I'm sorry I didn't say that sooner. Just ask the question, Jennifer, do you want to ask it again?
Oh, wow. I was just trying to get the conversation started, so
Yeah.
I'm sure people are wondering what the preparation looks like at this time.
Yeah, so if anybody would like to speak to that question of what might reparations look like in Amherst, what sort of reparation benefits might be available in Amherst in the plan we're working on now, so I think that's the question.
Has the African Heritage Reparations Assembly started to discuss this? I guess maybe that would, kick us off. What are your thoughts so far? That would be interesting to hear.
We haven't really gotten into the meat of that. So that's why we're here tonight, really, is to hear from the community and be able to be informed in our process of having those conversations. So there are lots of different ways that the plan could be shaped, and we're really in this place where this is an opportunity. In many ways, the world is watching us. We are the second community in the country to commit to reparation legislation and to commit to a reparation fund. And so we're really, we have an opportunity here to create something. So there's nothing that's really off limits, and we haven't really gotten into that discussion yet.
Is Evanston further along? Evanston, right?
Yes, Evanston has, and Alderwoman Robin Persimmons, who led the effort in Evanston, was sort of the pioneer really in this, and the lodestar, I would say. She wanted to be here with us tonight, and she was planning on trying to be here with us tonight, and I believe she'll be here with us soon. And so keep your eyes and ears open for that. But yes, they have chosen their first form of benefits, which they is a housing down payment. So I think it's a $25,000 housing down payment, and so that represents like 4% of their total 10 million. So, and they haven't, at least from what I understand, they haven't gotten beyond that yet. Yeah.
Part of my process around this is in COBRA, the National Coalition of Black Reparation Assembly or Association, has 5 areas of injury. And part of what I hope to bring in this committee is about the guarantee of no repeat. Because we see the data that although it looks different, racism is still a public health crisis, hypertension, diabetes, like our bodies are still super suffering from structural racism. So part of what I would love to hear from you all and where I come from is how do we stop the harm and then start to repair so that future generations don't have to continue to suffer something that started 500 years ago.
This is a serious issue for us in relationship to reparations here in Amherst. What should it be? What should it look like? How should we go about it? And so when we're asking the question of you, we're going to be quite serious. We need input from you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Susanna, and I'm a single mom of 2. I'm a member of this community. And I must say that, there are many challenges I've faced as a single parent. But the greatest challenge is being able to raise my children without my home being broken. And this has been done many times over, my oldest is 16, so my youngest is 14. Many times over the past 14 years, we've struggled just to have basic rights, just to be able to raise our children and to do what we feel is best for our children without the school stepping in or, some other organizations stepping in to remove, or break our homes, break our communities. So that's, I noticed that a lot of other single parents or moms in this area do not have their children, their mothers or their, uncles or brothers have their children, and we're left without their children, and we're left without the ability to raise our families.
My name is Laura Mills, and I am also a mom. I live in Amherst. It's like 4 to 6 years, I can't remember. I have 3 children, but 4 altogether. And what can I say? I followed the AHRA. I followed the town council. I've sent in comments and my personal thoughts. And what I just would like to say at this moment, the sister that spoke first about the school system, I know that Ms. Bridges has spoken when she was a child, how she was treated as, one of the only, black kids in her class. And yes, the educational system that I experienced with my kids has been very frustrating as well. And when we think of reparations, for me, it is to combat the structural problems that racism causes, which is in our education system, which is in, our politics and so on and so forth. But you can't have repair without money, and I know that some counselors have spoken of, which I love, Counselor Dorothy. I don't know your last name. Pam. But the last town council, there was a mention or comment of we need more power. Well, if that power equates to money, yes, I would agree with that. But it again is, what does that money go toward? All of us know that as we live, as we have families, what the needs are. There's housing, there's education, there's being able to get a job, all those things. And this, society has not addressed the problems and the structures that have been put in place to keep, people of color, in the margins. And so if we are really talking about reparations in a serious way, we have to talk about money. We have to talk about effort. What is that money going to go toward? And I just feel like we can't, you can't escape that if you're really serious about, repair.
And particularly, thank you to those who have been raising your kids in this community. And we know as folks with, PhDs, it's difficult if you're a person of color, and when you don't have the resources and the structures in this community to support families either struggle or they leave. And we don't want you to leave. So I, for one, appreciate you being here. I've been here 15 years. I have a list.
Yes.
Reparations for historical folks that identify as Black. So, to start with exclusionary practices in terms of housing, health, including mental health, businesses, supports to empower and mentor our youth through education, civic engagement. It is imperative that we are at the town council. Thank you, Anika Votes. Thank you, Alicia. We must be at the table to make decisions. So civic engagement. We must have mentoring to make sure we're there. Economic incubator projects, the arts, culture, the preservation and the creation of Black cultural community space. It's imperative that we have that so we can have our own space, our own self-efficacy. The recognition of structures
institutions built and inhabited historically by people of African descent so that we can preserve our stories and our history. That's a start.
Jackie, it's good to see you again. I'm Jacqueline Amherst, and I don't know that I know a lot of you. Vince, is that you way back there?
That's been here.
Oh my goodness. So I moved to Amherst, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
In the 1960s. And one of my first experiences was housing racism. And I called for an apartment. I was a graduate student, and I get to the apartment, and I'm sorry, it's rented, and we all know it wasn't. You know when that would happen. Fortunately, at that time in the department, or in the department of friends of mine who were in the theater department, one of the faculty was, there was an open housing committee or something, and said, if you're having trouble getting an apartment, you know, we will help you. So that, there was, you know, that, and that happened a couple times. Once, I mentioned Vince, who's been active in the town. Once I had another problem getting an apartment, and I called Vince, and there's, you know, I can't get this apartment. Introduce myself, I'm a psychologist. I worked in this community. I had that title before. One time I had the title Assistant to the Superintendent for Diversity and Equity. Is that your title? Well, I mention that because it's very frustrating to have the title with people having expectations, but I didn't have power. And one of the things is, you know, to make the goals and the outcomes that, you know, the people saying, so I would be asked, well, how come? And I'm going, you know, I'm not the deciding factor to change that. So since I was to see Amherst over here, I was the director of a counseling center at Amherst College until I retired. And now I'm doing all kinds of things. Gosh, there's so much I want to say. Okay, so what are those structural problems that need to be addressed? I mean, it was interesting. My son, who was 53, I think, was here this summer. We went by the neighborhood, which I used to live just not very far. Then it was the affordable housing, if you will. And then as we see the young kid of color on the street, I think so. And he started telling me about how and telling his children the names of the kids, and they would call him names. And, you know, well, 50-something years later, you know, he's still recalling this and all this. But apparently some of this just has not stopped, and I'm really looking to youth. You have a different life than I do. I'm co-fitted in, and I'm semi-retired, and I teach prospective therapists. You know, so that, you know, what I'm doing that, but the day-to-day, and I think that's what you all want to hear. What's the day-to-day life? What is it that needs fixing? Like, how do you know if there's restructuring? How will we know that things have been restructured? So, I think that's it for now.
Thank you.
That our council president, Lynn Reismer, and councilor at large, Andy
her here.
Gave us permission and asked us to share some of his story. And yeah, thanks, Tim. I'm going to pass this over to Dr. Shabazz to do that.
Did it ever take? I put it in online, but it didn't take. No, it didn't. So let me just read. I can tell you right now what happened in regards to my grandmother's house, as told to me by my mom and my grandmother. My grandmother wasn't kicked out of her house, but she got a very raw deal from Amherst College. My grandmother, Frances Brown, purchased a house that was located on 26 Woods Court in Amherst, I believe sometime in the 1930s. Approximately in the late 1950s or early 1960s, Amherst College approached my grandmother with an offer. They told her that they wanted the land that our house sat on and wanted to offer her a deal. They said that they would take care of her house and do upkeep and maintenance to her house as long as she lived there. Upon her death, Amherst College would get her house and land. My grandmother and her family were very poor. So after a couple of days of contemplating, she accepted the offer. Now, the problem is that Amherst College never owned up to their side of the bargain. By the time my grandmother passed away in 1979, her house was in shambles. My mom and her sisters contacted an attorney and told him the circumstances. Unfortunately, the attorney said, there wasn't much that could be done. Nothing could be done. I personally believe the attorney probably figured my family couldn't afford his services. So, in 1979, after my grandmother passed, my aunt, who still resided with her mom, took care of my ailing, and who had taken care of my ailing grandmother, had to vacate. It was bad enough that we were all mourning the loss of my grandmother, and now Amherst College was kicked my aunt out of the house. About 3 weeks later, I saw several trucks tearing down my grandmother's house. You can imagine how we all felt. We all knew that Amherst College had taken advantage of my grandmother because she was poor, black, and couldn't refuse an offer like that. What we didn't know is that Amherst College wouldn't live up to their side of the deal. So that's the story.
I have a question. Some of the things we've heard suggest maybe some more or better social workers or legal aid would be of help, but I'm not sure. So I just wanted to ask whether, because the help with down payment, I think that's great, but it will be a wonderful thing, but it'll be for a very small number of people. So I'm wondering whether more social worker or legal aid to working suing the people in Amherst that need help, whether that would be good. So I want to hear what people say.
I want to echo what Jacqueline said, which is that no amount of money will be enough, and $2 million is merely a start, and I'm glad we have a start. And for white folks in the room and not in the room, there's a beautiful opportunity to open hearts and open budgets to step up in this moment. And there's quite a bit of work to do. And also power, such an important point about titles without power. There's an enormous opportunity for white folks to step up and find ways, small and large, to change the way that power is distributed and the way that dollars are distributed. And $2 million sounds really exciting, and it also, if that is all that this town can muster in these 10 years, I don't believe that. There are more resources, and we have to figure out how to move them in loving ways. And that will take a lot of folks, of a lot of backgrounds, looking inward and outward. So I just want to make a call to white folks everywhere to join us in what could be the most important opportunity you'll have in this lifetime.
That's important. We know 2 million, is not everything. But part of our task as the AHRA is to come up with ideas of how at least that much can be spent. So before we throw it away as nothing, let's figure out the justification and the rationale for at least that amount. And I want to pick up then on something Susanna, you raised. So what part of it was that if an African heritage resident of Amherst in a crunch, can't make the mortgage payment, can't make the rent payment, got a real crisis. If there was a fund that you could come to, no questions asked, don't have to jump through, all the hoops, just, we see where you're living, we see you, and you got the need, we can cut the check. Could that kind of address sort of what you were raising?
In a sense, yes.
I mean, if you want to say more, I'm trying to get a fix on how, relative to what you were saying in terms of housing insecurity that we all sometimes face, if this could be a way to address that.
Yes, I feel that would most certainly help with housing security. In terms of the way the schools are structured and how they serve as oversight, it would always there would always be a situation where there would be instability in the household as long as they have the ability to remove your children. But yes, it would create disabilities. So if the children were to return, you would not have to worry about being homeless or possibly having your children given up for adoption. But yeah, that would be an amazing thing to do.
Part of what we're addressing is and the reason the importance of Rep. Don coming and giving the statement and everything is that we anticipate there would be a whole host of legal challenges if we created a fund and we did it like that, and it was specific to a community of injury, African heritage people. That the fact that it's limited to that, okay, it could be challenged on legal grounds as being racially discriminatory, reverse racism, and there's a whole precedent of this that has been built up by opponents of quote-unquote affirmative action to basically kill all efforts that were being made in schools, in places like UMass and Amherst College, to try and address the racial imbalances historically in those kinds of institutions. And so suit after suit from the Bakke case in California in the 70s, on up to the cases in Texas, where I'm from, such as Cheryl Hopwood, on up to now, the case is still pending around Harvard and the University of North Carolina that will probably be taken up by the court this year and will probably end race-based affirmative action in toto. It basically was killed in 1996 by Hopwood. I'm gonna tell you honestly, okay? And I go to the American Council on Education, I've met with presidents, and the level of restriction now in terms of this so-called holistic admission review that allows us to pay some consideration to race, but it has to be amongst a whole host of factors. It has really effectively reduced any meaningful form of race-based affirmative action to zero. And I'm including my own institution of UMass. It's a holistic decision. No decision is made purely on the fact that somebody is black that got into UMass anymore these days. That's wrong. Okay? So that decision is likely to be made that will finalize any aspect of race-based affirmative action in higher ed in America. Okay. So the point being, we expect challenge based upon that if we institute a program of reparations in this town that is specifically addressing those from a specific heritage in relation to the history of harm. We expect that. So the way we have moved to allow our town and for us to have comfort that we can go forward with a program like that is to get home rule legislation. Our state representative, our state senator are on board with that. The town got the town of Amherst law firm, KP Law, to do a study. Part of what came up in their study was the anticipation of a challenge based on affirmative action jurisprudence, that race-based affirmative action jurisprudence. So we've already, talked to the lawyers about this. We expect this, but that's what the home rule legislation would be designed to protect us, to insulate us by declaring that what we do is for a public purpose, that the town is in sync with. So it's a long way to go to get there. This has to go up in January. We've got to see if we get the speaker and everybody on board in the legislature to do it. But as this would go through, it happened in Evanston. They got a home rule legislation to allow them to do their housing program. So it's a step that we know we can take. We're prepared to take. Our town has made the moves with our legal to do this. So if that all manifests the way we hope, then the $2 billion fund that's being generated, then yes, if a family of African heritage in a crunch needs that kind of help, we can be there to help, in addition to whatever other kinds of programs might be recommended. But I wanted to just give that little bit of explanation and hope that if there are any other comments on that or other ideas, feel the mic is yours.
Hi, my name is Alicia Walker. I'm 29. I've lived in Amherst my entire life. I'm also a single mom. I have 3 kids. And so I also agree that $2 million is not enough. And there is no price tag that can be enough. And this is a very complicated question to be addressing because it's so multifaceted. And there are so many different aspects of just daily life that need to be addressed, specifically probably using this pool of money in order to improve the daily lives of our Black and brown residents here in Amherst. And so it's a very difficult question. So I have a couple of things to say, but I want to speak first to the question about if a Black resident can come and just say, I am in crunch and I need money right now, and that money can be administered to them through the fund. I honestly think that is the best purpose for the money. And so thinking about my experiences growing up here and the challenges that I face as a single mom navigating this town, that is really hard to do. And that is in the education system, in the housing, food stability, in navigating transportation. Every single thing in this town is a challenge to be stable. And I got it this month, I don't know if I have it next month. And that is an ongoing challenge. And so being able to provide that stability without the contingencies. And that is the current issue, is that when you're a single mom in this town and you're having problems, people love to tell you, look, there's a resource. I know you can use this resource. Go access it. And then you have to jump through obstacle over obstacle over obstacle just to access that resource. And so you have dug yourself into a bigger hole just to access a resource to fix a different hole. There are mountains of documentation you need to be able to access any kind of resource. That is a problem. There is a trust issue. They don't trust how we're going to use the money. Why does it matter? Black people aren't an expert in what their family needs, and it will be on a case-to-case basis different for every family. So building a pool that is for one specific purpose, I believe will actually not benefit the town, because everyone's situation is so specific to them and their family, and they need to be able to access the money for those things without having to provide documentation, without having to provide proof, because sometimes those things actually don't exist. And that doesn't mean that their story is true, and that doesn't mean that they won't greatly benefit from those things. And another thing is just like also speaking to growing up as a youth in this town, which is also very incredibly difficult for me, and I am a mixed child, and I often also was the only person of color in my class growing up for my entire childhood here. And I know my children are currently experiencing the same thing, although it seems and appears to be a lot more inclusive than when I was in school, which is hopeful. They still lack in representation in terms of staffing. And I think that's really hard for my kids in terms of feeling like, I belong here, I can see myself here, I can see that I can be successful because the people who I know who have been successful, who I see on a day-to-day basis, because remember, our kids don't see like lawyers and doctors and those people on a day-to-day basis, they see teachers. And if there are no teachers who are successful, who are teaching, who are giving back to the community that they see on a day-to-day basis, they don't see themselves in a position of success or in a position of the ability to even finish school. And like growing up here, a lot of my friends of color did not finish school at all. And if they stayed in this town, they are not in a good position right now. And that is so hurtful for me because the systems here fail all of them. And so I think that like one of the most important things, and it's hard because it's a perpetual cycle, is to stabilize the youth, because if you grow up in a home where it's consistently unstable, how are you expected to get your footing when you become an adult? And then it just goes on and on and on, because then you're an adult and you can't be stable, and you have kids and your kids can't be stable, and it just goes and it goes and it goes. And people are constantly telling you, go reach out to this program, go reach out to this service, they'll help you. And then they're telling you that a million things you have to do to be able to get help, or you have to go to a program, you have to miss work to be able to access this resource, or you have to do this. It's just like running in circles in this town, and it's so hard. Like, imagine there would be a place where you could go and you feel like, this is my situation, and they're like, we got you. That's it.
Lived in this town for, I guess, 18 years, but have been a resident of this area for, oh gosh, I don't want to tell you guys quite how long, but I started at UMass in '93, so you can figure it out from there. And I really came here, like I suspect a lot of people, just to listen. And I don't really have the answers. I don't know if they're my answers to give. But I do have two questions. One, so we've already ascertained that $2 million is not enough, but it's better than nothing. But it's certainly not enough to sustain any fund or any program past the 10-year mark that we're looking at. So I want to know what kind of a commitment the town is going to make to sustain the programs that this fund can start. And I also want to know, because we've also very much covered that this is systemic, and no system starts and ends in Amherst. So I want to know what kind of levers and what kind of mechanisms, you know, your body, but like the town, plans to use on our local banking institutions and institutions like that, because you can give somebody a down payment if the mortgage isn't there, it doesn't matter, right? So this has to extend beyond this committee and even this town, and I just want to know what kind of levers are going to be used to bring. Look, I'm a proud graduate of the African American Studies Department at UMass. I know where the priority, changed my life, amazing. But I think I can tell you pretty confidently where UMass's priorities are. and it's not a New Africa House. So how are we going to get even our local institutions to really be on board with this in a way that really sustains and makes a difference?
The one thing I would say in that, it gives me a moment to just say this for, I think, for all of the assembly. Again, we know that the funds, the possibilities of any local community, any municipality, to really fundamentally close the wealth gap and create the kind of true social transformation we need cannot be done by the budgets of any municipality in this country or even any state. Okay, Professor William Darity, graduate of Amherst Regional High School, Professor of Economics and Public Policy and Africana Studies at Duke University, makes a clear and convincing case on that. I have my copy of his book on the table over there, From Here to Equality, and his wife Kirsten. I think that's clear. What we hope is that as Amherst joins Evanston, joins the work being done across the country, Providence, the state of California, other places.
Soon to be Northampton.
That's in Northampton, you know, and others, that it begins to build this momentum that can embolden Congress, that can embolden the executive branch. You know, we've been looking at President Biden and Kamala Harris, hoping they would say something, do something. They came out, they gave statements to the Congressional Black Caucus, which does a big shindig every fall, and they had great sessions at this event they hosted with Sheila Jackson Lee, the author of H.R. 40, the bill in Congress, and the Senate version of it, sponsored by Cory Booker from New Jersey. You know, and the CBC, as one of their important issues, is the reparations legislation, but Biden and Harris didn't address it at all. We feel that's because with the politics of our country where they are, the fact that in the national polling, while it's grown since 2000 from less than 4% of white people in support of reparations to now perhaps about 30% somewhere kind of in support of it. Again, on the federal level, as the questions are raised, that's a movement over the past 22 years. And it's a movement because of, again, concerted momentum from the ground up. So our hope is, as modest as what efforts we may be able to do here are, that it can have that leverage effect in terms of the national momentum to build toward what Dr. Darity calls true reparations, the closing of the racial wealth gap.
And I'll just add quickly that we know that we know that education is a big component here that is important for us to get out into the community and be educating folks, be partnering with our local higher ed institutions, and as you said, banks, other organizations and institutions. And education is really the key, is to be able to have these discussions and build the support through this sort of dialogue, and then also through really having efforts that are intentional to get out and educate. We have members of the community that are initiating book groups. We have a wonderful series with Stolen Bean. We have lots of other, I think, educational opportunities that are being created now that we want to get out so that folks who are not engaged in this moment will become engaged. And so I just want to add that to it.
Think it's a good time now? No, move it up.
Thank you. I'm probably just going to be echoing like what a lot of people said, because these were like really great comments and insights. But while I am very excited and optimistic at the prospect of like working with our local, municipal bodies and governments and things like that. I also do urge that we are extremely critical too, on like another hand, of like the systems that are in place that are what really need repair, because I think with reparations sometimes that they will address the symptoms of the problem but not the problem in itself. And with US racial capitalism, I mean the structure itself is made to make sure that Black people don't succeed and to make sure that marginalized communities don't succeed. So I think that we also do need to take a really, really critical look at like the bodies that govern Amherst and things like that, and just how, and even like working with like banking institutions and things like that. I think that a lot of these structures are fundamentally, even if they agree like at face value that they do want to empower Black citizens and things like that, their functions go directly against doing so, and that they are not made to uplift people. They are made to build the capital of those who already have it. So I think that, I guess it's just more, these are kind of just inner ramblings to some extent, but I also just urge that we be extremely critical of what we do have in place, and work to kind of rebuild them completely for like a lot of aspects, just because they are not made, they cannot be improved for Black people because they were not made to make Black people.
I didn't grow up in Amherst, I just came here for college, I graduated for college. And I grew up in private school, so it was a predominantly like environment. And something that surprised me when I came here was seeing how little connection, like, because it's like majority, there are a lot of college students here, it surprised me that there's so little connection with college students and like younger people. One of the things that helped me when I was at private school was being able to talk to the older Black kids and like have like a little brother, little big sister program, and be able to like actually see them, like going to see us like go to college and like ask us about like where we're going to school and all that sort of thing. And even just like being in Amherst, I grew up in New York City. Being here makes me uncomfortable. And I don't want to say that and like sort of like enroach on the environment like I'm not from here, but just even like walking to work every day and like being like in this like area, as liberal as people want to be to your place, the entire environment feels so closed off to Black people. And like learning about like history of like colonialism, like all the Native Americans that lived here, just seeing like the way that the town, like it's so obviously built off of slavery genocide. I think that there's so much more work to do in just the way the environment looks, as opposed to, oh yeah, we support Black people, like, AHRA, whatever. Like, this is a beautiful thing, but I also would like to see it like be supported. Like, I don't think anybody at Winter College does this, Like, I don't think that anybody at UMass does this, but I feel like seriously invite Black people
Look at the last census, 2020 census for Amherst. There were over 1,800 Black folks here. And a large percentage of those are students. Actually, Amherst is, when you look at the census, Amherst is a student-centered town. There are just as many students as there are year-round residents. And that's something that, when I saw the numbers, it just soaked in. I would encourage you to go to the Amherst website, and under AHRA, there is a 2020 census. And you can move the cursor around to look where African Americans live in Amherst. It's something that if you have the opportunity to do it, you should do it. The other thing that's kind of stunning to me is that I hear people talk about their experience in Amherst, African Americans talking about their experience in Amherst. And I know that that's your experience, and it really hurts me to hear that. It hurts me to hear that people who are in elementary school or high school now are still feeling that. I am an elected member of the school committee, and that hurts, deeply hurts, because I feel that we have made incredible strides. We work on a daily basis, trying to erase all of those symbols of embedded racism. We know that we have a lot further to go, especially when you have an achievement gap. And you can chart the achievement gap by economic level. You can chart that. And that is something that does not need to be. We were set back by the 2 years of the pandemic that continues to resonate with us. Kids of color, BIPOC kids were disproportionately affected by that. It is an amazing struggle to now bring that and catch that back up. One of the things that I would like to say to you is that my experience in Amherst, I come from a multiracial family. My wife is here. She's white and Jewish. We have a kid who is Jewish and white. We have a daughter who is African American and Jewish. All of our kids have different experiences here in Amherst, quite different in terms of their going through the system. Now, one of the things that they had that a lot of other families didn't have, that I hear that I would really like to be able to stabilize that kind of situation, because it shouldn't be and can't, need not be, is that our kids have a stable environment. That both parents who are well educated, both of us have doctors. Our kids are highly educated, with 2 of them having PhDs. We did what every family should have the ability to do, regardless of economic station in life. Those things that are available should remain available. When I hear a person talking about just getting through the day, and that cycle of poverty, and what it means, for me, that's real, because that's where I came from. I came out of the coal fields of Western Pennsylvania, with knowing them in my shoes as I walked to school. The way that I escaped it, because I was plucked out of Western Pennsylvania, the home of all great football players. And given a 4-year scholarship. Texas came, he says it's anyway, that was mine. The other thing is that doing that, going, and I said this to them, shut up after this. When I got off the bus from Ronco, Pennsylvania, landed in Carbondale, Illinois, I walked across the street to get something to eat, and the sign says no blacks. That was my welcome to Southern Illinois University. 25,000 students strong, same size as Amherst. And so it hurts me when I hear that the kinds of things people are going through here are still ever present. I would love to, and I know for me, reparations means to me is I want all the kids in Amherst to be on a level playing field. That's my heart.
I'm Zane, sophomore at Amherst College, and I want to start with a quote. James Baldwin, also a resident here for a brief period of time, he wrote a letter to his nephew, sort of detailing what his nephew, about 14, not too much younger than me, detailing what his nephew would encounter while he was growing up in Harlem. As a young black man, all the racism he would encounter. And what he said was that this innocent country placed you in this neighborhood with every intention that you should perish. It was in my first grade classroom personally, the only black kid there, surrounded by white teachers, which isn't in any way white people blank, except by any means, that I learned that I just wasn't worth anything. And that can have a really, really crippling effect on your self-esteem, right? But what I needed at that time wasn't other black peers. I didn't need another black student in the classroom with me. I was doing fine academically. I got by socially. What I needed was black role models. I needed to look around me and see a black person 20 years ahead of me, successful, happy, living. Because at the time I couldn't imagine a future for myself. By some grace of God, I'm still here. But I could have easily not been here. I say all this to say that representation really does matter. I think at the heart of the issue is representation. A lot of young black children walk around feeling they aren't worth anything because they've never seen themselves be worth anything. And that does things to you. On a completely different note, Dr. Shabazz and, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your name. Michelle. I'm a student senator at Amherst College, and they came to our Senate meeting on Monday. And one of the things Dr. Shabazz brought up was this concept called symbolic conquest of publicity. Am I getting that right?
It's a little bit hard to hear.
Symbolic, oh wow. Symbolic conquest of public space. Can I mind? So you know that we got Hitchcock Street in Amherst, right? And you know we got Pleasant Street, right? I mentioned earlier that James Baldwin presided here for a long period of time. Why don't we have a Baldwin? Here's my question. We don't have a single street here that's named after a black person. Am I right about that? Not a single street. It's present even in the little things here. Our lack of representation shows that we don't matter. It shows us that we don't matter. And even if we can't get more black teachers in the span of 1 year, 2 years, however long it takes, the least we could do is change the names of the streets. James Baldwin, I mean, I don't know who Pleasant was. I don't know what that street's named after, but I know who James Baldwin is, right? I think it's a long time that we start showing our black residents here that they matter because they do. I think that's the key thing.
Want to make more space if there's anything that anyone else would like to add.
I really, young people here, who are African Americans, you're always walking power. You're never walking less than power. And one of the things that I thought about and I've learned over my life is that if I walk in power, I will attract those things that are powerful to me. One example is people keep talking about affordable housing. I'm on fire with it. God's put me on fire with it. For the last 2 years, that has not let me go with it. So 2 days ago, actually yesterday, a conversation that started in Florida migrated with excellent people that I knew. And it's the affordable housing that I'm talking about is not affordable rental housing. I'm talking about affordable home ownership. Because affordable rental housing just keeps people poor. Just keeps them poor. And what I guess what I'll into this is that walking in power, what has gotten me to this point at this time with this project is that yesterday I found myself talking to a giant investment fund, multi-billion-dollar investment fund. And we are going to go forward if we can work out some terms. But the thing about that is, if I wasn't walking in power in terms of myself, I would never be able to speak to a person like that on the phone. Now, of course, I have a hell of a lot of knowledge and information and skill. But I also bring that to the table in my personal. I want black people in the room, young ones, walk in power.
Say the last few thoughts. One, there's also Nina Simone, who went to Amherst College, or do an event, a musical event for poets, for writers, for musicians, African musicians. I would just also like to say that there's a lot of town council members in the audience, and the way that you all, vote for a budget for the school, for capital projects such as the library, such as I think there's another the school that's in the works. How you use that money, how you vote on that money, reflects what you prioritize, because we can always think of another thing to spend money on. But if we're prioritizing repair for marginalized communities, then you have to not fight against what the people in this town are telling you. And I would also say that, how about starting a house for Miss Bridges, who's been here for a long, long time. She grew up here. I mean, when you want to make repair, when you want to say that we're showing that we care about your lives, your concerns, and how you are living, I don't think it's hard to come up with things. And the last thing I would just say is that it's very confusing to equate or say the same thing with reparations and stabilization. I am one that, and like I said, I probably have too much time on my hands because I'm home all the time. But we can't try to confuse the community that we're trying to reach out to. If we are serious about reparations, don't call it a stabilization fund. Let us know what you propose and what you want to do, because there are so many things that could be funded. But there has to be a priority, and it just would be really nice if those who are taking the lead in this effort would be clear and just be honest with the community.
And I think this is a man named
who has started a queer community environment, and he has a website called Grassroots Reparations. Something that he said has stayed with me. I think about it almost every day. He said, "You think your money is yours, but it's not." I'll leave you with that thought. I think it speaks to the possibility and the need for individual reparations as well as systemic reparations.
He was living over here in Hampton for a bit. Yeah, we have right nearby, but yeah, he moved over to would like to announce that Bridgeford Unity is presenting Mojuba, a commemoration of our African ancestors, as well as an intergroup dialogue on reparations. Will take place Sunday, November 6th, from 2 to 5 p.m. at the Unitarian Meeting House on 121 North Pleasant Street in Amherst. I'd like to note as well that space right in that vicinity is the location of what was known as the Beehive. So we were venerating and remembering our African ancestors. This is where a lot of poor African heritage people lived in Amherst back in the 19th century. And it was deemed so problematic by some in the town that they referred to it as a beehive. And there were even, efforts to kind of burn the people out. But at any rate, it will begin with an ancestor veneration ceremony with libations, prayers, drums, song, dance, poetry. One of our friends, she helped to launch the Reading Frederick Douglass here in Amherst a number of years ago, will be leading us in understanding the African tradition of honoring our ancestors. There will then be an intergroup dialogue, members of the African Reparations Heritage Assembly. We will be in a more of a talk mode then to share some of our views of what's coming up for us about reparations. And then after we kind of model a little bit of a dialogue amongst ourselves, some of us on the Reparations Heritage Assembly, we will then break out into smaller groups. And members of B4U, the Bridge Community, that have been working with intergroup dialogue methods now for over 3 years, particularly around racial matters, will be facilitating these smaller breakout groups where we can have really intimate, deep listening, deep conversations, and then we'll come back to kind of report back in from our discussion. There will be free refreshments. One of the founders of B4U, Deborah Snow, formerly owner of Blue Heron Restaurant, is going to be getting some of these refreshments together. So it won't just be something in charge of your glycemic index, like we had here tonight, some apple ciders and sugar-rich cookies. Thank you so much. It will be some serious food you won't want to miss when Deborah Snow starts in the kitchen and getting things together. So there will be that, and it's free. It's open to everybody. Donations are welcome, but we will be remembering our ancestors, venerating the ancestral tradition, and then having intergroup dialogue.
And there are many flyers about it.
How many flyers? Put on our for free.
Check-in, is there any other last comments?
Just quickly say the Northampton group, I think I can speak for, there's 7 of us, have been inspired by this evening, those of us who are here. Thank you.
Keep going.
You've been inspiring us throughout here, from the petition to tonight.
I probably don't need the mic.
Wow. Amherst Media, though.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Yes, you're right, for Amherst Media. Yes, anything. So, I just want to know, this is an initial one.
are we going to have more listening sessions, and where should we look to find out the next date?
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Yes, we are going to have more listening sessions. We hope to have hybrid sessions as well as full virtual sessions, and perhaps more of this in-person time together. So please look on either the town's AHRA website or our newly launched Engage Amherst website, which is, by the way, an excellent website for all things Amherst if you don't know about it. And it's interactive and there's lots of great information. So we have a page there. And so we'll have multiple listening sessions. We're also going to try to get out into particular communities like UMass, Amherst College, Hampshire College, and have listening sessions in those places as well. So if anybody has any ideas about where a listening session could take place, please let us know.
I'm going to build us a social media page too for those of you on those platforms like Facebook.
Too much building. Yes, I created.
I'm a co-administrator.
We're gonna, yeah, so we have a Facebook page, we're starting to post on there, and also do you.
Young people want to make it a TikTok page.
We also hope to, as I said, bring Alderwoman Robin Simmons from Evanston and to have a panel in the very near future for educational purposes, and for engagement and dialogue, and to learn more from the former Alderwoman, what's going on in Evanston. She has launched an organization called First Repair, and is going into communities all over the country, helping them set up. So I think Northampton will be next for her to consult with them, and so we hope to do that. Do you want to talk about the inclusion portal really quickly, and then we'll close out?
So we, at that, our AHRA page, we have a link that can get you to our portal. We ask all people of African heritage to please, let us know you're here. Let us be part of our census, our count. One of the things that I would note as well, we really want to thank the support and presence of Amherst Media in all that we do. They get back there is on the board, former board president. What I'm really saying is they did record tonight. If you have any issues with respect to if you spoke or you were a participant and you're not sure you want that aired, please let Alexis know, let us know that, we will go into post-production and modify anything. But I think basically the camera the whole time has really been here. So it would just be more or less your voice that we're talking about. If you don't mind, then this is part of the educational ongoing efforts through Amherst Media that we will be broadcasting this to let people know some of what was presented here. Hopefully keep this conversation growing and being more dynamic.
And a big, huge thank you to the Hitchcock Center for no cost so that we could be in here together and not spend any of our resources to be able to do this. So thank you so very much. I also want to acknowledge that Councilor Anna Devlin Doctor has joined us a while ago, but wasn't able to announce that. So thank you all so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate your presence. We look forward to being in connection with you. Reach out to us anytime. And thank you again. Have a good